What does the H stand for in HIPCO? No, what are the causes of biodiversity loss? What's the H? Habitat loss, right? So H is habitat loss. What is I? Invasive species. P? Pollution. C? Climate change. And O? Overharvesting. So Monday, you have a test, okay? So there's a review. You should have the review, all right? If you don't, I have extras up front. This will be the first time you'll have a free response question on the test. I'm giving you them ahead of time. The 3 options are on the back. I will choose one. If you have a genius idea of being sick on Monday, just so you can figure out what the free response is, guess what? I reserve the right to give you whichever one I want. And it will probably be different, or it might not. So if you do not take the test on Monday because you are gone, sick, on Tuesday I will give you a different question, or maybe the same one, okay? So,
but what if like that?
That's fine.
You're still gonna be mean.
What do you mean? You're not going to know which one you're getting anyway.
Yeah, so why? I don't understand why.
Some people like to choose to have their parents call them in, and then they can just ask everybody what is on the test, and then they can just study that specific information.
Yeah, so
right?
What if,
So if you're actually sick, yeah. If you're actually sick, you will still get a different test. Oh, these poor people are going to have to listen to this recording later. Okay. All right. So on the back of your review, there are 3 different ones. Yeah. The back of the review, there are 3 different ones. I will pick one, okay? It would benefit you to write out the answers. You can use the internet. You can look up stuff online. I don't care, okay? You just need to know the answers to these, okay? And I will pick one. Now, normally your tests have been like 35, 40 questions. This test is a little bit shorter. It's 30 questions. Now, it goes over 2 chapters, but remember I said these 2 chapters aren't super detailed. Some of the chapters are bigger than others. These 2 aren't super big, and we're not going super in-depth with them. So 30 questions between the 2 chapters, 30 multiple choice total, okay? And then you'll have the free response question. So normally a minute per multiple choice question is what they give you on the exam. So you'll have 30 minutes to do the 30 multiple choice, and then you'll have 20 minutes to do the free response, which is how much they give you. It shouldn't take you 20 minutes to do the free response because you've already looked over them and you know what you're going to write, hopefully. Okay? Yeah. Correct. It depends. Totally depends. Some years on the free response, the average is 2.6 points out of 10. Some years, the average is 7 out of 10. So it totally depends on the year. And what they do is they take the top certain percent of individuals, like the top 20% get a 5. You know, the next 20% are going to get a 4. And they combine all of the scores. So there's no hard and fast rule. It depends on the free response question of that year. So, yeah. So we will be grading each other's free response questions on Tuesday. You will be grading 5th hours. Okay, this is 6 hours. So 5th will be grading 6th. 6th will be grading 5th. Okay. Now, you're not going to know whose you are grading because guess what? You get to pick a fake name. Whatever fake name you would like. It could be an animal, it could be a superhero, it could be your favorite actor, it could be some made-up gibberish. I really don't care. Okay? So you can write down your real name and then make up a fake name. I don't care what it is. Okay? If you can't come up with something, I don't know, find a word somewhere and write it down. All right? This is so that when the other class gets your papers, they're not like, oh, so-and-so sucked so bad on the free response. It's just like somebody's rando fake name, okay? All right. So we need you to get out your note packet. Get out your note packet.
When we know everyone's included.
You'll,
For like baseball or something.
But like, I know who like the other people in my class. Jane Doe. Oh yeah. I wasn't sure. But she doesn't like talk to us about it. She just puts them up. I hate myself. She kept my stuff.
all right, we are on climate change. So climate change affects temperature and precipitation in different parts of the world. It causes a shift in species ranges. Okay, we saw that. We did some warm-ups where we saw that the species were moving north because as the world heats up, they're moving north to where it's colder because they're used to those colder temperatures. So climate change, one of the questions on your multiple choice was which environments will it affect the most? So climate change is going to affect extreme environments, typically the Arctic, so the poles. It will also affect deserts. Okay, so think extreme. The reason it affects extreme environments the most is because they already have really drastic amounts of either temperature or precipitation. So any change in that is going to be detrimental to the organisms that live there. So imagine the desert, right? Species exist with small amounts of rain and water. Imagine if the desert gets only a tenth of the rain now that it normally gets. Some of those organisms are not going to survive because they're used to having a certain amount of water or a certain amount of temperature. So extreme environments are affected the most. If we look here, we can see this is the Arctic. Okay, this is one of those extreme environments that's affected. 1970, here's the amount of sea ice that covered the area. 1980, 1990, 2000, 2007. Okay, they predict by 2100 we're going to have this much sea ice. Not very much. Okay, no, this is in the North Pole. Yep, North Pole. So the difference between the North Pole and the South Pole, the North Pole has no land up there. It's all floating ice. And the South Pole is land, okay? So we'll talk when we get to climate change. That has different effects on the ocean and sea levels. If we look here, we can see Arctic fish. This is earlier on. This is between 2004 and 2012, so this is 2004. So we can see that as climate change is happening, these fish are going to move more north, okay? And as they move more north, they're starting to push some of these Arctic fish out of their habitat, and they're causing the Arctic fish to decline because these fish are now competing with the Arctic fish for their habitat. As you can see here, this is temperature, okay? This is a difference in temperature of 0 is the dark blue, all the way up to red, 6 degrees, okay? This is Celsius. So in the Arctic, we're having the most dramatic change in temperatures, right? So the Arctic area is experiencing a lot of the effects of climate change. All right, next up, we have overharvesting. So overharvesting is just poaching, killing animals, right? No. I would assume that you guys mostly know this: hunting, fishing, poaching, capturing. The biggest problem is that they are in super high demand. So even though we have regulations, and we have quite a few regulations in place, they're in such high demand that people will go at any lengths to get them because they believe that they have medicinal properties or because they can sell them for a lot of money. So if people are willing to buy them and willing to pay people a lot of money for them, people are willing to go out and capture these species because they can make a living off of it. Now, in 1900, some of these species were becoming a problem. This is the picture of the dodo bird, okay? The dodo bird went extinct. A couple other species were facing extinction. So in 1900, they passed what was called the Lacey Act. This is the United States passed this. And it prohibited or prevented interstate shipping. What does interstate mean? Between states, right? So the federal government can control things between states, okay? They don't have a lot of control. They have some control about what goes on in each state specifically, but it's a lot easier for them to pass laws about trade between states because it's actually in the Constitution. I took a whole class in college on this. Basically, the only thing in the Constitution that they can use to basically regulate like environmental problems is the fact that it goes between states. So there's a clause in the Constitution that allows the federal government to control interstate or between state shipping and trading. And so by taking the federal government and saying, hey, we can prevent these species from being traded between states to state, it gave the federal government a chance to kind of put their say on this and try to prevent these organisms from being overharvested. So you'll see a lot of this has to do with the shipping and the trading of species. So this was the Lacey Act. You won't hear a ton about this, but it was the first step kind of in the direction of preventing some of this shipping and trading. So eventually, we come up to today where we see, it looks super scary on the back, don't worry, we're not going to go through all of it. You don't need to know quite all of it. We have different laws that protect individual species, and we have stuff that helps protect entire ecosystems. So there's kind of two different ways to go about protecting biodiversity. So the first one, star, underline, exclamation point. This one you need to know, okay? This is like one of the best things you can write for a free response question if you have no idea, okay? If they're like, oh, what things can we do, or what legislation can we pass, you could always write the Endangered Species Act, and 9 times out of 10 it'll be right, okay? So it was passed in 1973. Do you need to know this date? No, you don't need to know any dates, as far as I'm concerned. I will let you know if I find out differently, but I don't think they would ever ask you about a date. It allows the USFWS. Anyone know what that stands for? Come on, what do the first 2 letters stand for? Okay, United States. This is the Fish and Wildlife Service. So United States Fish and Wildlife Service. So it allows them to list species as threatened or endangered. So you know how we have endangered species or threatened species? We wouldn't have those without the Endangered Species Act. It says, hey, we can label them as endangered or threatened. And then we can set rules about them, saying you can't kill them or hunt them or trade them. So this was the first major piece of legislation, besides the Lacey Act, right, that actually created these protections for those species, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have any idea that they're these endangered species. Endangered species would not be a word without the Endangered Species Act, because endangered, threatened were not words until, or they weren't words that were commonly used until the Endangered Species Act. Now, the other thing it allows us to do is allows the government to purchase land, okay? Now, this is a kind of a problem. It's a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing for environmentalists, bad things for people who want to build homes and businesses. What they can do is if somebody wants to build a business, let's say somebody doesn't want them to build a business there, what they can do is they can look up and see if there's any endangered species that live there, and if there are, they can say, oh no, we don't want you to build that there. There's an endangered species there, and sometimes they can actually prevent somebody from building on that site because there's an endangered species living there. It also lets the government buy land and say, oh yeah, we're going to buy this land so that nobody can develop on it because it has habitat that's critical to an endangered species. So this little cartoon says, those opposed to extending the Endangered Species Act, okay, so those that are against it, basically all the people who want to build, those in favor, all of the animals. This I put up there not because I actually think you need to know it, but because it was on one of your multiple choice questions. I will not ask you this on the test, and I would not recommend memorizing it. But if we look at all the things that are listed under the Endangered Species Act, the most things that are listed there are plants. So most of you said which ones were the most that were listed under there, and you said amphibians, because that's what I taught you. It's actually plants. Now, amphibians are still the most threatened group, okay? And they're predicted to have the most decline in their species as the years continue, as of right now. So if you're ever asked this on an AP exam, go with amphibians, okay? But I wanted to show you that for the sake of that multiple choice question, the answer was plants, okay? Amphibians are still the most threatened, though. All right, so we also have the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So guess what this saves? Marine mammals, okay? Prohibits killing and trading marine mammals, okay? So we can't import them, we can't bring them into our country. We can't export them, we can't take them out of our country either. And that's because a lot of people were killing these mammals and their numbers were getting really low. Killer whales, dolphins, sea otters, manatees. And so now we have this law that prevents anyone from killing any marine animals, or mammals, I should say. So while this is good, right, this is all the United States. So what about worldwide? It's a lot harder to get things done on a world or global scale, but they actually had a convention. 175 countries came. When was the last time you heard of a convention that had 175 countries coming together? Not very often, okay? It's really hard to get that many countries all in agreement in one place, okay? So this was a major accomplishment. Again, it happened in 1973, so there were 175 countries. What it did is it defined what we call red list species that can't be traded. So it was like the Endangered Species Act, but on a global scale, okay? And these countries agreed that we are not going to allow these things to be traded from our country to other countries. Now, does that still happen? Sure, because if you want something bad enough, right, you can make it happen. It's kind of the debate around gun laws right now. Some people are saying, well, if you make all of these restrictions, people who want to get these guns will still be able to get them. And some of that is true, okay? I'm not going to get into gun debate, but similar idea, okay? The problem here is that it's hard to enforce and that there's a lot of corruption. So what does this corruption look like? Well, I'm going to show you on the next page, but a lot of the people that are working to prevent the trading of these animals, sometimes they're really good and they do a lot of this help and they help prevent these species from being traded and killed, but occasionally you'll get people in there who benefit off of it. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the vast majority of officials are honest and committed, and we salute them, okay? Yet, we also see customs and police officials bribed. So they take money just to let people through quietly with their illegal animals. Logging and hunting licenses forged, so allowing people to hunt and log without actual permits. And poachers and wildlife traffickers set free, okay? So people who are supposed to be persecuted or sent to jail or whatever just happen to get set free for whatever reason. So it says that we must root out the bad apples, etc. So there are definitely some individuals that are making money off of this and are letting some of these individuals that have these poached animals through. So now we look at how do we protect entire ecosystems. We have zoos and aquariums. We have protected lands. Okay, so protected lands, if you don't want to write these up here, that's fine. Because I'm assuming you know that these are protected areas, parks, nature reserves, wilderness areas. So what scientists do is they apply something called the theory of island biogeography. If you had bio, this will sound familiar. You don't really need to know this term, but all this says is that we should have really big protected areas. Sometimes it's better than small, okay? And if we have a bunch of habitat areas, they should be close to each other rather than spread out all over the place, okay? So the reason being big means we have less edges, right? And if they're close to each other, we can get animals moving, and we said that's gene flow, right? When we get organisms bringing their different genes into communities, right? And the more genes we have, the more genetic variation, and the more our population is probably going to survive. So one of the things we're going to look at is these habitat corridors. They connect habitats, which is good because it allows for gene flow. So here we get two forests being connected by this strip of land. And so now we get fewer animals dying because they get run over by a car. Okay, I'm going to show you some other pictures of habitat corridors. Here's one here, right? So they can just go across this little tunnel to the other side. Here's one here. These are all crabs.
What?
The crabs go up here. Okay, the reason they know to go up there is because they have to get to the sea to breed. So the sea is over here. You know how turtles can sense where the sea is because they need to go to the sea once they're hatched? Same kind of thing. Okay, so they built this little crab walkway. So a habitat corridor just connects habitats. Okay, it connects two habitats. So it's land that connects two habitats. And then we talked about the edge habitat. And the edge habitat is just we want to minimize the amount of edges that an ecosystem has. So if we have the option between one big one or two small ones, we're going to choose one large one because it has less of those edges than the two smaller ones. Yes? Typically they are. I'll go back. So that's pretty much all you need to know. This is where I stopped with my other class, so you guys could have time for your review. You don't need to know the other stuff for the test. If you want to look at it, there's the SLOSS debate is the debate over whether it's better to have a bunch of smaller reserves or a big, large one. Typically, people say big or large one, but smaller ones have some benefits too. And then Biosphere Reserves. So we're going to work on the review. If you want to get that out, I will come around and help you.